Mother's Day, a day of happiness and gratitude. However, on May 11th, 2009, that faithful day took on a new meaning when the Payne family's lives were forever shattered by the man Freddie Hernandez, who in cold blood shot and killed their beloved daughter, Melissa. The evidence and testimonies presented today have proven that Freddie Hernandez acted with deliberation and intent to kill Melissa, and therefore should be convicted under the charge of first-degree murder. First, the defendant acted with oh my gosh. For Freddie to be convicted under the charge of first-degree murder, certain criteria must be met. First, that the defendant acted with deliberation. Deliberation refers to an act that has been committed after reflection and with intent. Deliberation is never an act committed hastily. Second, that defendant acted with intent. Intent is when a person's objective is a specific result. Freddie Hernandez acted with deliberation. Prior to the murder, he threatened Melissa with a curtain rod, stating, "I'll kill you if I catch you cheating with Vernon." Furthermore, on the day of the murder, Freddie took a gun out of his mother's child's purse, Elaine, and completed the extremely complicated process of starting the green Ford Taurus, leaving the Cube, a bar he had been drinking at that night, and then drove over an hour from downtown Denver to Strasburg. After arriving in Strasburg, he went to Tanya Payne's house to ask where Melissa was staying. Finally, he drove to Melissa's parents' house, shook the door, and eventually was able to enter. After Peggy Payne left the door unlocked, taking the gun in with him and clearly intending to confront Melissa and kill her if he found her with Vernon. Freddie had hours before the murder to think about and reflect on what he was about to do. He continually pushed forward with his plan, going as far as to search for Melissa and make a long drive down to the Payne residence. Undoubtedly, Freddie acted with deliberation. Furthermore, Freddie acted with intent to kill Melissa. After coming downstairs with a gun and finding Vernon and Melissa together, Freddie became irate and began yelling. Freddie then struck Melissa across the head. Following the strike, Freddie shot and killed Melissa with a Smith & Wesson 9mm pistol. Freddie intended to cause harm to Melissa. He deliberately brought the gun downstairs, hit her, and soon after shot her, which was confirmed by autopsy and testimony. He acted with intent. Immediately after taking the life of Melissa, Freddie turned to Vernon and said, "You owe me your life." This has been confirmed through Vernon's phone call with Freddie's mother of his kid, Elaine. In the call, he told Elaine what Freddie had said during the ordeal. Later, Vernon testified that he was afraid of Freddie and feared for his life, and that's why he told the police conflicting stories. Vernon told us that he was scared to come testify today, but he has done this in hopes that justice will be done for Melissa. Remember that Vernon has left his car, the green Ford Taurus, that only he and Freddie and Vernon's wife could drive, at Melissa's house. Peggy Payne testified that Melissa and Vernon both arrived in Melissa's Jeep and that she didn't see the green Ford Taurus until the morning of the murder. When Peggy looked out the window after hearing a noise, the Taurus was in the driveway with the hood up. The car was gone after Melissa was killed. When Peggy went out front, Vernon was still on scene when police arrived, and no Ford Taurus was at the house. Freddie drove that car to Melissa's parents' house, killed her, and left in the car. Freddie arrived back home at Elaine's house around 8:30 a.m. At Elaine's house, she noticed he was putting clothes in the washing machine. She assumed that Freddie was washing the smell of perfume off his clothes because he frequently cheated on her. However, Elaine also stated that Freddie was not someone who tried to hide his cheating, meaning he likely was washing blood off his clothes. Freddie told Elaine his stomach hurt and that he was going to get Pepto-Bismol. Leaving Elaine's house, Freddie gave a call to his friend Everall. Everall owns the club that Freddie had been drinking at the night of Melissa's murder. Everall and Freddie are quite close friends, and Freddie told Everall that he was in trouble. Soon after, Everall picked Freddie up and drove him to Colfax and Chambers. Before departing, Freddie told Everall that he was going to the country for a while. Later that day, Freddie Hernandez was arrested. After the murder, Arapahoe County Detective Garner searched the Ford Taurus and found 5 Smith & Wesson 9mm pistol bullets. These pistol bullets matched the type found in Melissa's body. For Freddie to be guilty, the jury must make their decision that the evidence provided proves that beyond a reasonable doubt that on May 11th, Melissa Payne was murdered by Freddie Hernandez, meaning based on reason and common sense that the defendant is guilty and not due to vague evidence. Be sure to remember that beyond a reasonable doubt is not beyond all doubt. Use your reason and common sense in evaluating the evidence and in the coming testimony in coming to your verdict. The evidence you've heard today proves that Freddie Hernandez, after deliberation and with intent, killed Melissa Payne on May 11, 2009. This is a matter of justice, and for justice to be served, Freddie Hernandez must be convicted of first-degree murder.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Emma Hobson, and during this trial we have seen evidence that points to the fact that Freddy Hernandez did not kill Melissa. We know that Freddy was at the Cube all night and didn't leave until much after the sun rose. We know that Vernon was lying during at least one of his many statements. We know that the detective did not do a complete investigation of the events that happened at 7:17 a.m. on May 11th, 2009. Why was Faith, Vernon's wife, not interviewed? It was her car found at the scene. Why was Elaine not a suspect for this case? She just had Freddy's baby and found out he was still in a relationship with Melissa. Why was the timeline not investigated for accuracy? Freddy was supposedly in many places at the same time. The prosecution's timeline has Freddy missing for about 3 hours. All of these questions and facts make it easy to conclude that there are a number of instances that give rise to reasonable doubt. Let me remind you that it is the prosecution's burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was Freddy Hernandez who committed first-degree murder. It is not our job to prove that he didn't do it, but to show the doubt in the case. The prosecution failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Freddy Hernandez was actually at the scene and ever pulled the trigger. If Freddy didn't leave the Cube until it was sunny and warm, there's no possible way for him to be at Melissa's sister's house at 6 a.m. Yet Melissa's sister claims that Freddy was at her house at 6 a.m. looking for Melissa. She said she told him where she was, and an hour later, even though it only takes about 5 minutes between houses, he showed up at Melissa's parents' house. However, we have a witness saying he was an hour away at the Cube. Why would Freddy go to Tanya's house when he knows Melissa lives with her parents? And was there an actual witness that saw Freddy at Melissa's? No, there wasn't. Not to mention, it seems pretty unlikely that Melissa's sister would tell Freddy where she is. Tanya says she loves her sister and has a good relationship with her. Melissa allegedly told Tanya about threats made to her. As many of us know, we like to protect our loved ones, not put them in danger. Yet, if those allegations are true, it seems unlikely that Tanya would just give up information about her sister to this man. Why would Tanya tell the man her sister is afraid of her location early in the morning? And the fact is, she never called Melissa to warn her, or her parents saying that she sent Freddy to their house. Her entire story doesn't make sense. And when Freddy supposedly reaches Melissa's parents' house, nobody actually sees him there. Peggy, Melissa's mother, only saw Vernon and Faith Monet's car. Peggy wakes up, has a bad feeling, unlocks the door, and goes back to bed. I don't know about you, but when I have a bad feeling, I make sure all the doors are locked, not unlocked. Then she heard the door open, but all of a sudden wasn't concerned. What changed for her to decide she wasn't concerned about it? And if Vernon's testimony is true, wouldn't Peggy hear Melissa and Freddy arguing? But the fact is, she heard the door open, heard nothing, and then the gunshots, but nothing in between. And when she rushed to the window moments after the gunshots, the only thing she saw was Vernon, practically naked, with a phone, not calling 911. We also know that Vernon, the prosecution's main witness, who the detective said they were basing their case off of, admitted lying to the police. He also admitted that his several statements and testimony gave doubt to which of his stories is true. He gave a statement to the police, then fabricated a whole other story. We cannot trust a witness that changes their story every time they tell it. How do we know which of his stories to believe? Doesn't his testimony make you hesitate? In the prosecution's closing statement, they said that Freddy's intent to kill Melissa was confirmed by testimony. This same person who gave that testimony admitted to lying to the police and the doubt his many stories create. We don't convict people for first-degree murder based on false statements and lies. Everall Palmer, the owner of the Cube, where Freddy likes to get drunk and be with other women, testified to seeing Freddy there all night and waking up to him the next morning. Everall stated that Freddy was always in trouble and frequently being caught with other women. In fact, Everall states that nothing that day was uncharacteristic to his normal behavior. We also have Everall admitting to Freddy being at the Cube at 6 a.m. If Freddie left at 7 or 7:30, he would very reasonably be back at Elaine's around 8:30 to see his baby. When he got home, he did his normal thing. He washed his clothes to get the scent of other girls out of his shirt. And after a long night of drinking, his stomach was upset, so he went to the store to get Pepto-Bismol. And it is not unreasonable to think that the pressure of being a new father would have Freddie freaked out and wanting to leave. For a man that doesn't do well with commitment, it seems likely that having a baby, a child that depends on him, would cause him to panic a bit. In this courtroom, we also learned that the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office detective failed to carry out his duties completely. He stated that it is important for investigators to look at every aspect of the crime scene. This means eliminating all other suspects. If you can't eliminate another suspect, how do you remove reasonable doubt? Faith Monet's car was seen at the scene and later found to have bullets matching the ones in Melissa. But the detective did not investigate Faith. In fact, Detective Garner didn't even know Faith was married to Vernon. It seems like very lousy detective work to not know the relationship between the owner of the Taurus and the man found at the murder scene. Vernon acknowledged he knew he was cheating on his wife with Melissa that morning. Faith has a reasonable motive to want Melissa dead. She caught her sleeping with her husband. Detective Garner admits they have no idea where Faith Monet was that morning. They said Faith wasn't interviewed because she wasn't at the scene when the police arrived. But how do they know? If they never interview her, how do they know where she is? But we know that her car was at the scene and her husband was in the basement sleeping with another woman. In fact, we know that we cannot rule out Faith Monet as a suspect, and therefore there is doubt in this case. Prosecution made a big deal about the gun in the cap. However, Elaine, the person who supposedly saw the gun, actually testified she doesn't know what was in the cap. She never actually admitted to seeing a gun. With Freddie's behavior, we could reasonably assume that it was an alcohol bottle he was trying to consume. And Detective Garner admits that they never found the gun that shot Melissa. Elaine Black, the woman who just had Freddie's baby, also was not a suspect in the case that police interviewed. She just had a baby with Freddie and found out he was still sleeping with another woman. She had a motive, yet there was no investigation done. She was just let out of the hospital after giving birth, her emotions and hormones high. After talking to Melissa about their continued relationship, it is no wonder Elaine was frustrated. Is she telling the truth that she stopped at confronting Melissa? Or did confrontation go a little too far that morning? Oh, and Elaine testified she was never actually interviewed by the police. None of the clothes from any of the suspects was checked for gunshot residue or blood. Vernon had 40 minutes to change, wash his hands, or tamper with other evidence. Vernon wasn't wearing clothing when Peggy saw him, so where did his clothes go? But the investigator never tried to find the clothes, so we will never know. This lack of investigation makes it hard to convict someone who wasn't seen at the site for certain. We are also missing key evidence in this case. We have absolutely no fingerprints. Why would the detective not run fingerprint testing on the bullets found in the car? Wouldn't you have liked to know whose fingerprints were on those bullets? Without this evidence, we can't say whether those were Freddie's, Vernon's, or Faith's. Except Faith wasn't even being considered because the detective didn't know about her motive and connection to key players. We also know that Melissa's father's statement wasn't taken. The investigator forgot to interview someone at the scene. Interviewing all people on the scene was admitted to being very important in a complete investigation. Therefore, the detective admitted to not doing a complete investigation. But don't worry about the justification for not interviewing him. I will directly quote Detective Garner. He didn't seem like a prime suspect. That just sounds like a lazy detective who doesn't want to write more. Are we going to convict a man of first-degree murder when the detective on the case admits to making mistakes and not carrying out all important things in the investigation? This detective built a case on assumptions and managed to only look at the facts that supported their case. This is not a case where we have enough information to convict my client. Let me remind you that the Due Process Clause protects the accused against conviction except upon proof beyond a reasonable doubt of every fact necessary to constitute the crime charged. In this case, we have reasonable doubt whether Freddie committed this crime. Other suspects, such as Faith and Elaine, have not been eliminated because they were never even investigated. How can we sentence Freddie Hernandez for a crime that we don't know he committed? We have an incomplete investigation. Melissa's father, a witness at the scene who was not interviewed. We have multiple suspects with powerful motives and no information about them. We have Faith, the wife of a man caught sleeping with another woman, whose location we don't know. We have Elaine, a jealous girlfriend who thought her boyfriend had changed, just to find out he was still sleeping with other women. And we have Vernon, the man prosecution admitted basing their case off of, who admitted to lying and giving doubt to his own truthfulness. If any of these factors cause you, a normal, rational human, to hesitate, then you have a legal obligation to find Freddie Hernandez not guilty. When you go back to deliberate, consider all of the things prosecution did not show you. The weapon, someone who undoubtedly saw Freddie at the scene, and evidence that the detective ran a complete investigation. Really think, does this prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Freddie did it? No, it doesn't. The prosecution has one more chance to share their case. Think of all the questions you still have for them. Who was driving the Ford Taurus that morning? Did anyone who did not admit lying to investigators see Freddie at the scene? Where was Faith Monet, Vernon's wife and the owner of the Taurus that morning? Where's the weapon? Was this a complete investigation, or was it rushed and the detective jumped to a conclusion? If prosecution cannot answer these questions, then they have not proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Freddie Hernandez committed a crime. If Freddie wasn't there, finding him guilty isn't fair. It is your duty as the jury to find Freddie Hernandez not guilty. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Morgan Kokenberg and I want to begin with reassessing the meaning of beyond reasonable doubt. This means you get to use your reason and common sense in looking at the evidence in this case. Now, the defense talked a lot about alternate suspects that could have committed this murder, but let's talk about what the evidence actually showed. During the trial, you heard from many witnesses. You heard from Everett Palmer, owner of the Cube, a bar in Denver. Mr. Palmer states that Freddie Hernandez was at the Cube the entirety of that night before May 11th, the day of Melissa Payne's death, and that Freddie left the bar that morning in the green Ford Taurus. You heard from Elaine Black, who was picked up from the hospital on May 10th after giving birth to Freddie Hernandez's child by Freddie and the green Ford Taurus. She states that night, the night of May 10th, the day before Melissa Payne's death, Freddie Hernandez placed a knit cap with a heavy object in it into her bag. She thought that it might be a gun. He then took out the knit cap with the heavy object in it later that night, at Elaine Black's home around 2 a.m., conflicting with Everett Palmer's statement of him being at the bar all night. The defendant then went to the bar and did not arrive back home until about 8:30 a.m. When he arrived home, he immediately washed the clothes he had been wearing, and later that day he bought Pepto-Bismol due to his stomach being upset, saying that he was afraid of getting busted. Miss Black found these two behaviors weird enough to mention them to police. Elaine also stated that Freddie cheated on her often, and her first assumption but he was acting weirdly because he cheated on her that night. But she also tells us that it is not unusual for him to cheat on her, and that he usually doesn't try to cover it up. Elaine Black can be ruled out as a suspect due to her recently giving birth, meaning she would likely be on bed rest, and not being able to drive the green Ford Taurus that was hard to start. The green Ford Taurus was seen by Peggy Payne, Melissa's mother, at the scene of the crime. The green Ford Taurus is registered to Faith Monet, but is most often driven and shared between Vernon and Freddie, as stated by multiple witnesses throughout our trial today. Although the vehicle is registered to Faith Monet, she was not considered a suspect due to the fact that no one puts her at the scene or in the timeline. Freddie Hernandez, however, continued to come out throughout the detective's investigation. You as a jury have also heard from Vernon Johnson, who spent the night at Melissa's house the night before she was fatally shot. Vernon Johnson was awoken the morning of the 11th to Freddie Hernandez in the Payne's home. Vernon then watched Melissa Payne be fatally shot. Questions have been raised as to why Vernon did not admit witnessing Freddie kill Melissa in the first place. During Vernon's testimony, he states that this is because he was afraid of what Freddie would do to him. "You owe me your life," is what Freddie said to Vernon that day, after killing Melissa after finding them together. Furthermore, during Tanya Payne's statement to the police, she recalls her sister telling her about how Freddie would kill her and Vernon if he ever found out that they were together. This is what happened on May 11th, 2009. This is not a case of bad detective work, but a case of following a lead that continues to pop up again and again throughout the investigation. We see Freddie in the green Ford Taurus the day before Melissa's murder, picking up his wife from the hospital. We see him drive to and from the bar in the green Ford Taurus. We see him at Tanya Payne's house shortly before the murder in the green Ford Taurus, asking where Melissa is. And we then see the green Ford Taurus at the scene of the murder, seen by Peggy after she was awoken to rattling at the front door. And finally, the bullets recovered from Melissa Payne's head after she was fatally murdered was the same type of bullet that was found inside the green Ford Taurus during investigation. The same green Ford Taurus that Freddie was seen driving that day. The same green Ford Taurus that was seen shortly before Melissa was shot. Freddie Hernandez, the defendant, had priorly expressed anger towards the possibility of Vernon and Melissa ever being together. When the defendant found out that Melissa Payne and Vernon Johnson were now together, he was angry. So angry that he went to Melissa Payne's sister home looking for Melissa. So angry that he would kill her, as he stated before. Now, what I ask of you, the jury, is to think about everything you heard today. Beyond reasonable doubt is coming to a conclusion using the evidence at hand, not taking a name and running with it and what could have happened, which is vague and speculative, but what is shown during the investigation and statements given today. The evidence shows that the defendant committed this crime, and we ask that you all bring justice to Melissa and find the defendant guilty. Thank you.